A wealthy man grieving the loss of his only son spots a homeless boy wearing the very watch he buried with him. When he confronts the child, the heartbreaking truth he uncovers not only shatters his world but also offers a second chance at healing, a discovery that will change both their lives forever. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe for more real, emotional stories that reveal how the smallest moments can change everything. The sun was just beginning to rise over the city skyline, casting long shadows on the cold pavement as Charles Whitman, a wealthy real estate mogul, stepped out of his sleek, black car. He was dressed sharply as always, but his eyes looked tired, sunken from years of pretending he had moved on. From the tragedy that shattered his life 3 years ago, the sudden loss of his only son, David, in a car accident, Charles had everything money could buy, yet since that day he felt emptier than ever. Every morning he walked the same route past the train station before heading to his office, trying to feel something, anything, until that morning when something stopped him in his tracks. On the corner, curled up beside a closed bakery, was a young homeless boy, maybe 10 or 11, sleeping beneath a threadbare blanket. Nothing unusual in the city except for one detail on the boy's wrist was a very familiar watch. It was silver, worn with a tiny blue scratch on the face, one that Charles had put there himself the day he gifted it to David on his 15th birthday. His heart began to race. At first he thought it had to be a replica, a coincidence, but as he stood frozen staring, he knew it was David's. That watch had been buried with him. Charles walked over slowly, unsure of what he was even going to say. The boy stirred, blinking up at the man with wide, cautious eyes. "Where did you get that watch?" Charles asked, voice trembling more than he wanted. The boy sat up, clutching the timepiece protectively. "My mom gave it to me," he said quietly. "She said a nice lady gave it to her before she died, said it belonged to someone special." Charles's throat went dry. His pulse thundered in his ears. "A lady," he crouched down. "What was her name, the lady?" The boy frowned, struggling to remember. "I think Miss Ellen. She worked at a hospital, helped people like my mom when she got sick." Charles's eyes widened. Ellen was the name of the nurse who stayed with David in the ICU, the only one who refused to leave his side in the final hours. She was the one who comforted Charles and his wife through their worst night. A memory rushed back. Charles had handed her the watch before the burial, saying, "Keep this. I can't stand to see it go underground," but after the funeral she vanished. He never saw her again. Charles sat back stunned. How had the watch ended up here with this boy? "What's your name?" he asked Trevor. The boy whispered, "You live here." "Most days we move around. My mom died last winter. I've been on my own since." Something in Charles shattered. He saw not just a child in rags, but a soul forgotten by the world, just like his son, who always begged him to do more for kids in need. David would have helped him, his wife used to say. He had your heart before the money changed it. For the first time in years, Charles felt his son's presence, not in a photo, not in a dream, but here in this boy wearing his watch. "Trevor," Charles began, swallowing hard, "what if I told you that watch belonged to my son, that he died, and somehow it found its way to you?" The boy didn't speak. He just looked down at the watch, and then back up at the man with something like fear or maybe hope. "Would you want to come have breakfast with me?" Charles asked. "We can talk more. I can tell you about him." Trevor hesitated, then slowly nodded. That morning, over pancakes and orange juice, Charles shared stories he hadn't dared tell anyone in years about David's love for comic books, his dream to build schools for kids who had none, his laugh that filled a room, and Trevor listened wide-eyed like he was hearing the story of a superhero. By the time the plates were cleared, Charles had made a decision that would change both their lives forever. That afternoon, Charles didn't go to the office. Instead, he took Trevor to a barber, got him new clothes, and arranged for a full medical checkup. But more than that, he just listened. As Trevor opened up, Charles learned the boy had been sleeping on benches, sneaking into public libraries for warmth, and living off scraps for nearly 6 months. His mother, diagnosed with terminal cancer, had spent her final weeks working part-time at a diner before passing away in a shelter. Ellen, the same nurse who once cared for David, had been the one to comfort Trevor's mother in her final hours. When she learned of the boy's situation, she gave him the only thing she had left that mattered, David's watch. She said it had power, Trevor whispered, glancing down at the silver band, "to keep me safe, and when things got hard, I should touch it and remember someone out there cared." Charles couldn't hold back his tears anymore. That watch, once a symbol of a father's love, had somehow made its way from his son's wrist to a forgotten child who needed hope. It felt like fate, no, like David himself had reached out through the chaos of the world to lead him here. By evening, Charles took Trevor to the large empty guest house on his estate and tucked him in with a full belly and warm blankets. For the first time in ages, the house didn't feel hollow, it felt alive. Over the next few days, Charles began the legal process to become Trevor's guardian. The media caught wind of the story, a millionaire taking in a homeless boy who wore his late son's watch, and people around the city were moved to tears. But Charles didn't care about the headlines. For him, it wasn't charity, it was redemption. In Trevor, he saw all the chances he never gave David. The time he never spent, the hugs he never gave freely. He promised himself this time he wouldn't waste any of it. Weeks passed. Trevor started school. He aced math, struggled in writing, but loved art every day. Charles helped with homework, learned how to cook simple meals, and even tried painting with Trevor on lazy Sundays. He laughed, more slept better sometimes in the quiet hours of the evening. Charles would sit on the porch and talk to David as if he were there. "He's a good kid, son," he'd whisper. "You'd be proud of him, and I'm trying to be the kind of dad you deserved." And one day, as Trevor stood on stage receiving a school award for kindness nominated by classmates who once ignored him, he looked out into the crowd, spotted Charles, and smiled, not just a polite smile, but one of belonging, of love. Charles stood there, hands trembling, heart full. He reached into his coat pocket, touching the old photograph of David he always kept close. For the first time, the pain didn't burn, it warmed. He finally understood sometimes life doesn't bring back what you lost, but it gives you someone new to carry the love forward. And in that boy's laughter, in every beat of the watch on his wrist, David's legacy lived on.